This is a context video regarding the dragons that are all over City Hall in Salt Lake, and how dragons are not part of Mormon culture, and supposedly the early Mormon settlers built that place. Now, this is an idea that many of you will be familiar with, that is usually referred to as Tartaria, like a society that has been hidden from the public, and many of these grandiose buildings were not built. And in the 1800s, it is claimed that this building in Salt Lake was built by the Mormon settlers. This guy compresses a pretty good example of this stuff into about 5 minutes. Let's just watch what he has to say. And this is as a context for the video that I made titled, "Do Mormons and Masons Worship Dragons?"
Man, I got some awesome stuff to present.
In this video, folks, this is Tony. Hope you're all doing well. I found out some new stuff, folks, that connects all my other things that I've discussed with regards to the 1800s. We're going to be talking about Sigmund Freud and how he is also in on this. I talked about John Kellogg not too long ago. I think they're all interestingly, of course, tied. And actually, it comes into lots of really interesting developments that I came across with regards to this. So what am I talking about? So obviously, you've seen these buildings before. I've mentioned this before. You have these buildings that are extremely extravagant in America's early history in the 1800s. And when you start looking into these buildings, it seems like they're built in a year's time or 2 years' time. And they got the most ridiculous stories to them. Like, let me show you one building. There's this one building that was built in 1 year's time and was given as a wedding gift, allegedly. This is what they're saying. I think it was this one. Is it this one? Yeah, I think it was this. It was this one. This building here, built as a wedding gift. Are you kidding me? Allegedly in a year's time by, Whitmer and Sons. Just some random construction company. Took them a year to build it. Just him and his sons just went over there and built it really quickly. Yeah, okay. I don't believe you, really. I mean, honestly, they would have to have a team of like 300 people with power tools and all the latest technology to build this puppy. On top of that, having a bunch of artists to build the architecture and sculptures at the top. Yet for some reason, a team of a few people with horse and buggy, no power tools, somehow built that thing. And then also, by the way, they tore it down a couple years later and rebuilt it. Apparently 3 times, they claim. What? What? You know what I mean? Like, these stories just make no sense. Here's a building that's in Minnesota. And interestingly, it has a number on the side. It says 1889. Some say maybe they...
Notice it says City Hall, which is what the building in Salt Lake that I'm referring to also is. City Hall. It becomes the center of society when we reemerge and come upon these buildings and make that the center of the city.
Added the M to it. What this guy was pointing out
in the video is that these stones are unbelievably heavy. In the City Hall building, 40,000 pounds. Some of the biggest stones in this building are 40,000 pounds. 40. This thing is pure stone. Okay? This thing is unbelievably heavy. Made of granite, folks. Granite stone. The entire building is just pure granite stone. Look at the design on the stone. How did they build that? Without power tools. No power tools. Horse and buggy, 40,000 pound stones. Isn't this kind of like the Great Pyramid? Like, we don't know how this was built. No one just never asked the question. They always ask it about the Great Pyramid. They just don't ask about these buildings downtown in Minnesota at the City Hall that you can't build anymore. We just build these weird Kroger and Walmart buildings out of like thin metal, right? This is built out of granite. Will last for thousands of years potentially. Perhaps it already has. We don't know. But, Whitmer and Sons built this in 1 year. I'm not saying, I don't know who built this one. I'm just joking. It's just like, what? So, of course, interestingly, Perhaps some people knew about all this. Perhaps some people back then, of course, interestingly, perhaps some people knew about all this. Perhaps some people back then knew these buildings were clearly not made by, us. They kind of knew all that was going on, that these things were there in these cities or remnants of a ruins of a city before new city folk came in from the settlers to America. And perhaps there's a number of people that knew this stuff and remembered it and were telling stories about it. Now, an interesting theory came about, I heard about. I heard about it from a YouTuber who heard about it from someone else. I think it was a woman that came up with this theory. What if, now this comes back to the whole topic of orphan trains. Have you ever heard of the orphan trains? Like, there was some strange things in the 1800s where they had just unbelievable amounts of orphans. Unbelievable amounts. I think it was like, I can't remember the number, but it was a ridiculous number. A huge percentage of the population. Just where do they all come from, right? A lot of people are asking this question. And there's a lot of, theories that people have had where they came from. This one seems the most believable, most practical, most pragmatic, I can't see how this is not it. Check this out. They also had another thing that was very prevalent in the 1800s. At the exact same time, they had these orphans trains and orphans in huge amounts. They also had huge amounts of insane asylums at the exact same time. Perhaps the parents were in the insane asylums. They had massive amounts of insane asylums back then. Okay? And what was the common reason they were put into these insane asylums? Religious fervor. Are you a little bit too religious, folks? You a little religious? Oh, maybe you need to go to this place. You're too religious. A little bit of this, a little bit of this up there, got a couple screws loose, Yes, indeed, but perhaps it wasn't really about religious so much, but perhaps they knew something, some history. Wouldn't stop talking. You're talking too much, dude. You got a little bit too much religious fervor there. You need to go to that building over there, dude. Yeah, we don't like what you're talking about, bro. Stop talking about that stuff. So this is kind of what's going on with this whole thing. And we're actually, like I said.
Now, with this in mind, watch the video that I created titled, Do Mormons and Masons Worship Dragons? That is showing you what's on City Hall in Salt Lake. And remember, dragons do not play any part in Mormon culture. The early settlers of Utah were all Mormons and Masons. I don't know too much about Mason culture and heritage, but I know I've been surrounded by Mormon culture most of my life, and I've never heard anything about dragons. These buildings in Salt Lake that became City Hall were built by a culture who had some sort of reverence for these dragons, and the cover story that is given while I'm taking these videos, the first time I went there and noticed all these dragons, Ghost Tour rolls up, Grim Ghost Tours, and the lady jumps out and shows some of the people she's putting on a ghost tour, one of the dragons, and points it out and says that the reason that's there is because early settlers had sightings of a lake monster at the lake. That does not hold water as a reason why they have carved these dragons all over City Hall in Salt Lake, because some people had some sightings of some stuff. Bullshit. Whoever made those buildings were part of a culture and a society where dragons played a much more prominent role in society than some people said they saw something down by the lake like Loch Ness.